This Parsha Podcast is dedicated in honor of a young birthday boy, Eitan Pinchas Sendowski, the son of our dear friends Alon and Natalie. He turned 2 this week. Happy birthday, young man. May young Eitan live till 120 and grow and mature into a special person and a special Jew who brings joy and delight to his parents, to his community, and to his Creator. And as a proud parent of a rambunctious 2-year-old boy myself, I have some advice for these young parents. Buckle up. It's going to be a fun year. My son Yisrael is a prodigious mess maker, and he's really hitting his stride now in his 2nd year. He spills water basically every day. Basically every day there's 1 or 2 or 3 massive spills. But he gets so much pleasure out of it. He relishes it. Just some highlights of his recent escapades. A bottle of orange juice, smeared cheesecake all over himself, dumped a bag of flour over himself and the kitchen. Just a couple of nights ago, I was taking a well-needed and well-deserved little nap on the couch, and I woke up. He had dunked both of his hands into a can of cake icing, and he smeared it all over himself, his hair and his face, and all over the kitchen and all over the house. It was still worth the nap, but this is just some advice. 2-year-old boys, they're in a class of their own. And just today, I'm in the Torch Center here, and I'm preparing for the podcast on torchzoom.com, 8 p.m. Central every Tuesday evening. And I call home before the podcast, and I heard about his newest, most recent exploit. He emptied a shampoo bottle on his baby brother, and then he wanted to give him a little bath or a shower, so he took some water from the toilet, and in the words of my wife, the baby Dave, was a ball of shampoo, and the bathroom was awash in water and shampoo. Of course, I like it. Cleanliness is important. But I did some calculation. This prodigious mess maker, he'll probably has, 2 more years of his prime mess making years. You do some math, 2 to 3 massive messes a day. So it's only 1,500 more messes. It's really not the end of the world. But the truth is, our attitude is that it's a privilege to be able to deal with the Almighty's children. They're our children, but they're also the Almighty's children. And the Almighty tolerates all of our messes and all of our misdeeds. And He loves us nonetheless. So we do the same for our children. And I imagine, this is a word of encouragement for all parents, I imagine that when we tolerate the messes of others, the misdeeds of others, well, that will ensure that the Almighty will tolerate our messes, measure for measure. It's Parshas Vayeishev, a most amazing series of events unfold in our Parsha, events that have national, familial, banashal, global, and even cosmic ramifications. Lots of shuffling, lots of maneuvering. And of course, with the benefit of hindsight, we see the bigger picture and we see the divine orchestration at hand. Jacob has 12 sons from 4 wives. And we pick up the story when Joseph is 17. And he's a youth and he has some juvenile tendencies. Perhaps he's a bit vain. He plays with his hair a bit too much. But Joseph was Jacob's favorite. He looked like him. He taught him all of his Torah that he studied in the Academy of Shem and Aver, and he made him a special garment. And this made the other brothers a bit envious of Joseph. And Joseph was also a tattletale, a snitch. He always ran to daddy to reveal what the other brothers were doing wrong. He brought their slander to their father. Rashi tells us anything that he saw that the brothers did wrong, he would tell his father. And Rashi gives us 3 examples. He saw them eating Avram and Achai, meat from a still living animal. Ran to daddy, ran to Jacob. He saw them mistreating the other brothers, the brothers from the 4 maidservants, calling them servants, slaves, he ran to Jacob. He thought that they were maybe guilty of some sexual impropriety. He ran and he told Jacob. And Rashi points out that Joseph was punished in these three areas specifically. When the brothers sold him as a slave, they slaughtered an animal. They did not eat the animal alive. And the fact that he accused the brothers of calling the other brothers slaves, he was sold as a slave. And the fact that he accused his brothers of sexual impropriety, that was a subject that Joseph had to wrestle with when Mrs. Potiphar set her eyes upon him. So Joseph is the favorite, and that does not endear him to his brothers. And his snitching did not endear him either. They hated him, and they cannot see him in a positive light. And then Joseph had two dreams where he portended his dominance over his brothers. We're all bundling, and my bundle stands up straight and tall, and your bundles bow down to mine. And the next dream, the sun, the moon, 11 stars bow down to Joseph. And he tells the dreams to his brothers, and that exacerbates their enmity towards him. And then Jacob sends Joseph, go check up on your brothers, see how they're doing. A wellness checkup on your brothers. And he sends him off from the valley of Hebron, from the deep part of Hebron. And Rashi says, wait a minute, Hebron is mountainous. There are no valleys there. So Rashi explains, this is part of a deep plan. A deep plan that was revealed to he who lies in Hebron, namely to Abraham, who is buried in the cave of the patriarchs in the city of Hebron, in Hebron. He was told in the covenant of the parts, chapter 15 of Genesis, you should surely know that your descendants will be foreigners in a foreign land, and they'll be oppressed and enslaved for 400 years. This is the Almighty's deep plan. That prophecy is being set into motion when Jacob sends off his son Joseph from the depths of Hebron. He meets his brothers. They entertain to kill him right then and there. Let's see what happens with his dreams. But Judah intervenes. They settle, we'll just sell him as a slave. He is sold and eventually ends up in Egypt. Of course, all the Jews will end up in Egypt and will spend centuries there and will emerge from that experience as a formidable nation. That's a long ways away. Joseph's the pioneer, and he's heading there in chains. But this is the divine plan unfolding, the deep plan that was revealed, or the end point of this was revealed to Abraham, the one who resides in Hebron. Joseph was wearing the special tunic, the special garment, the sweater that Jacob had made for him. They dunk it in blood. They bring it to Jacob. Do you recognize this garment? Oh no, a wild animal savaged Joseph. They're giving off the impression that Joseph was killed, and Jacob becomes inconsolable, and he will remain in a state of depression, a state of melancholy for the next 22 years, until he's told Joseph is alive. He's informed Joseph is well. He's a king in Egypt, and they are reunited. Now, before the Parsha follows Joseph in Egypt, there's a fascinating intermission, the saga of Judah and Tamar. Judah was demoted from his brothers. When they see how badly Jacob takes the disappearance of Joseph, they blame Judah. You persuaded us not to kill him. If you just told us, bring him back to Jacob, spare him entirely, we would have listened. He was demoted. He dismarried. He bears 3 sons. The oldest son marries a woman named Tamar. She is very righteous and special, as we shall see, and bold and audacious. But the son dies childlessly. The next son now marries Tamar as a form of levirate marriage, yibum, and he also dies childlessly. Judah has one remaining son. He doesn't want to give his third and final son in levirate marriage to Tamar. He tells her, listen, my third son, he's too young. I'll give you a call when he's ready. I'll drop you a note. I'll send you a postcard. Now Judah's own wife dies as well, and Tamar is home waiting for that call, which never arrives. So she understands what happened over here. And she is very desirous of bearing a child with Judah. So she hatches a bold and risky plan. She masquerades as a prostitute, and she seduces Judah. And it's time for the payment. And Judah says, well, I don't really have any cash on me. So she says, no problem. Just give me some of your personal items as collateral. Pay the payment later. He says, sure, here's my signet. Here is my walking staff, which is emblazoned with a very large J for Judah, and his special personalized bespoke garment. She goes home. He tries to send payment. The prostitute is nowhere to be found. Tamar pulled off her operation with surgical skill. She goes back home. She puts on the garment of a widow, but she still has Judah's personal stuff. And what do you know? She's pregnant. But that's a crime, because she is still designated for son number 3 in Levirate marriage protocol. So it's almost like a form of adultery. So she must be tried. And who's the judge? Judah himself is the judge. Your daughter-in-law Tamar, she's pregnant. And she's guilty. And she sends, hey, here's the signet ring. Do you recognize it? Here's the staff. Do you know who this is, perchance? That's the father. And Judah fesses up. She's more righteous than me. I'm the father. And it's all okay, because the father can also fulfill the Levirate marriage, at least before Sinai. There's no illegitimacy. She's pregnant with twins. And they are indeed born in the Parsha, Peretz and Zerach. And this is very notable because Peretz had a son, Chetzron, and he had a son named Ram, and he had a son named Aminadav, who had a son, Nachshon, who had a son, Salma, who had a son, Boaz, who had a son, Oved, who had a son, Yishai, Jesse, who bore a son, David. So 9 generations after this scandalous, or at least unconventional union between Judah and Tamar, emerges David, king of Israel, Mashiach Hashem, the Messiah of God. So we have in our Parsha the backstory of Messiah. But in truth, we know the Talmud tells us that there are 2 Messiahs. There's really 2 families of the monarchy amongst our nation. There's Messiah from David, from the tribe of Judah. And there's the lesser known Messiah ben Joseph. Joseph, I don't want to spoil it for you, in next week's Parsha, he becomes a king as well. So there are 2 kings amongst these brothers, Judah and Joseph, and each one of them is the father, is the progenitor of a Messiah. So the backstories of both kingdoms, of both houses of the monarchy of the Messiah, are found in our Parsha. Now, if you read our Parsha, this is the meta theme I want to talk about. No one at the time, besides for God, of course, no human knows that the stories that are happening here are stories of coronation. Not just kings, ordinary kings, but the greatest kings of them all. David, Solomon, Messiah of both flavors. MBD and MBJ, Messiah ben David, Messiah ben Joseph. Our Parsha is the first part of the story, where only God knows what's happening, where this is all heading to. This is Act 1 of a most consequential story. The tension's being built up. The problem is completely unresolved, and there's no humanly way to conceive of any good coming out of the story. It's just disaster following disaster. After the intercession of Judah and Tamar is told, we go back, the Parsha goes back to Joseph. He's now a slave in Egypt, and he rises the ranks, as it were. He works for a guy named Potiphar, a minister of Pharaoh. And Joseph has charm. He has charisma, and he's successful. And he is given tremendous responsibility in this family. But he is targeted by Mrs. Potiphar. She lusts for him, and he's constantly rebuffing her. And one day she corners him, and she disrobes him, and he flees. And then she turns the table on him. She accuses him of targeting her. Joseph is imprisoned. So he was sold as a slave, and now he was accused of a crime he didn't commit. He is placed in the dungeon. This is not a Norwegian prison where you have cable TV. This is an Egyptian dungeon from 3,500 years ago. But again, he rises the ranks, as it were. He has grace. He has charm. He has gravitas. Even in jail, Joseph is a star. And the parsha ends with two more dreams. Joseph gets two cellmates, disgraced ministers of Pharaoh, the butler, the baker. They have disturbing dreams. And Joseph sees them in the morning. Why are you so sad? Why despondent? What's wrong? You don't like the prison chow? And they tell him about the disturbing dreams. And Joseph interprets them. I have good news. I have bad news. The butler, good news. In 3 days, you will receive clemency. You will be pardoned and restored to your previous position. Mr. Baker, I have very bad news. In 3 days, you will be decapitated. And Joseph makes a petition to the butler. Would you kindly put in a good word for me to Pharaoh? I'm innocent. Maybe I can be taken out of this dungeon. And the final verse of our parsha. The butler was restored. He did not remember Joseph. And in fact, he forgot him. Joseph will have to languish in prison for 2 more years. The king will yet be coronated. But that's going to happen in next week's parsha. So there's a story unfolding here on 2 levels. We have the people. We have Jacob. We have his sons. We have Joseph. We have Judah, Tamar. We have all these people, the Egyptians, and they're engaging on earth. But of course, once we finish the story, we see how it all shakes out. We see the backstory from the depths of Hebron, and we see the epilogue of the story. We understand that God is orchestrating events from on high. If you think about just the experience of the 3 protagonists of the Parsha, Jacob, Judah, and Joseph, basically nothing goes right for them in the Parsha. Jacob has to deal with familial strife, and he's trying to quiet the tensions. He tells him, Joseph, your dreams, they're unlikely to happen. But it doesn't work. He's sold. Joseph is sold. Jacob is led to believe that he's dead. And Jacob is plunged into an inconsolable depression. Judah is demoted. He loses his children. He's duped into a dalliance with a paramour who turns out to be his daughter-in-law, and he has to publicly admit to it. And he's now the father of twins who came into the world in a most ignoble fashion. And Joseph, things go from bad to worse. His brothers hate him. His brothers entertain. Should we kill him? Let's throw him into the pit. Let's sell him as a slave. He gets accused of all sorts of crimes that he is innocent of. He goes from crushing disappointment to crushing disappointment. He's hated, he's sold, he's targeted, he's imprisoned, and he's forgotten by the butler. That's the story of the people in our parsha. But you zoom out, and we see the end of the story. Judah, he became the father of Messiah. Jacob was positioned in a way that he can become, his people, his descendants, can burgeon into a great nation and fulfill the dream of Abraham. Joseph was positioned in a way that he can flourish and become king. When you zoom out, see next week's parsha, you read the rest of the story, you see that this is bringing about the formation of our people. Joseph will be personally elevated to the viceroy of Egypt. Judah will bring about Messiah. So the story that's unfolding on 2 different planes in very different ways. And there's a heavy dose of irony here. We have the people acting, and much of what they're trying to do is trying to circumvent the divine plan. Yet their actions are not only futile, their actions, who are trying to stymie, if you will, the divine plan, end up leading to the implementation of said plan. Jacob has a problem. Joseph and his brothers are not getting along. So he publicly dispels the veracity of Joseph's dreams, and he made Joseph a tunic. And the sages explained that this is a form of a bulletproof vest. This was a way that Joseph would have a degree of protection. He was untouchable so long as he was wearing the tunic. That's why the brothers had to divest him of the tunic before they hurt him. Now this tunic that's designed to spare Joseph, to protect him, this itself exacerbated the brothers' enmity. Now the brothers are given very disappointing news. The bratty brother, he thinks he's going to rule over us. He has these dreams. He's a megalomaniacal, dangerous person. Let's stamp it out. What should we do? Should we kill him? Should we throw him into a pit that is teeming with snakes and scorpions, our sages tell us? Should we sell him as a slave? They're trying to outmaneuver God's plans to a certain extent. Yet them selling him as a slave is actually what led to Joseph actually actualizing said dreams and divine plan. Judah withholds his son from Tamar. He doesn't want to have an association with this woman. He thinks she's dangerous. And he himself is led to consort with her. He becomes the father himself. And even when Joseph tries to accelerate his redemption from the dungeon, he tries to intervene. He says, "Butler, just do me a favor. When you are restored, put in a good word on my behalf." No, this is God's plan. You try to help God, so to speak. It's not going to work. The butler forgets him. God's going to act independent of Joseph's participation. So I think on one level, this perhaps is a very powerful lesson that we can take from the Parsha. When things are bad and they're looking bad, and whatever we're trying to do, we're hitting a brick wall, a dead end, and we're recipients of circumstances and situations that we don't feel like we deserve. We're experiencing punishment, something painful, something frustrating, something patently unfair. It's good to remember that there's something else that's happening. There's an entirely different realm and dimension where the Almighty is directing the ship. And He has a plan, and He loves us, and He knows exactly what He is doing, and He has complete vision of everything. We see a tiny little sliver of history, of existence. The percentage of knowledge that we have, just even of the world today. We once did the math. What percentage of human knowledge does every individual human know? You know your perspective, which is there's 8 billion people in the world. So what percentage of the world, of what's happening right now, do you know? And then you think about the past and the future and all the different dimensions and realms. We know so little. We don't see the whole machine. It's very helpful for us to remember that the Almighty has a plan, and He's operating concurrently, so to speak, with us. And when you zoom in and you look just with very narrow tunnel vision, you may see a story of disappointment, of frustration, of Judah's demotion and shame, of Joseph's enslavement, of Jacob's strife, turmoil, despair. You may see Joseph in the dungeon, but from God's perspective, he's in the vestibule of the palace. You zoom out. You see the founding of Messiah. MBD and MBJ, Messiah ben David, Messiah ben Joseph. This deep plan. It's deep. It's deeper than what we can perceive. It was revealed to he who resides in Hebron, but it's deeper than what we can sense or perceive. It's a plan that will ultimately lead to, afterwards they leave with great wealth, as was promised, spiritual, material wealth. There's no greater wealth than to be assigned as the Almighty's nation. There's no greater wealth than to get the Almighty's Torah. There's no greater wealth than to be entrusted with the mission to save humanity, to perfect the world. All that's been set in place in our Parsha, but only when you zoom out. When you zoom in. It's only Act 1. And it's only disappointment and frustration. If this is true to our forefathers, it's also true to us. And I think the first lesson I want to deduce from this, I think this is what it means to rely on God. To recognize our own very small, very narrow window of vision into what's really happening, and to rely on God. He is all-powerful, omnipotent, omniscient, and He has a plan. And even when things seem to be topsy-turvy and there's just confusion and disappointment, God's in control. What are you worried about? In the morning we say that, we take our soul and give it to God. I think we go to sleep every night. Most people, right? Go to sleep every night. And what do? Who's going to make sure that you're breathing at 4 a.m.? Maybe you're one of the people that are up already at 4 a.m. At 3 a.m. How do you know that your heart will continue pumping? You rely on God. He's in control of that and of everything. Don't worry. You can rely on Him. Our parsha is called Vayeishev. So, as is true with basically every word, it takes more letters to spell it in English than it does in Hebrew. So I spell in English Vayeishev. A lot of letters. In Hebrew, it's only 4 letters. Vav, Yud, Shin, Vez. Vayeishev. Our sages tell us that there is a phrase that comes from the book of Psalms that we say every day. It was so important, it was placed in the daily prayer. And those 4 words, it's an acronym for Vayeishev. Vav Yod Shin Vez, V'yiftechu B'cha Yod'ei Shemecha. It's a verse in Psalms. They will have trust and reliance in you, those who know your name. And the verse continues, Ki lo azavta darshach Hashem, because you have not forsaken those who seek you, O Hashem. This verse is found in the book of Psalms in a very memorable chapter verse. It's chapter 9, verse 11. It's 9/11. This is the war on terror. When there's terror, there's anxiety, there's fear, there's uncertainty. What do? How do you fight that? You remember this verse, this parsha. It's Parshas Vayeishev. V'yiftechu b'cha yodei shemecha. Have reliance on God. He never abandoned anyone who sought Him. When there is a terror-inducing situation upon us, and of course we don't want that. We don't ask to be freaked out. But when we're placed in a situation of Vayeishev, how do you fight the war on terror? V'yiftechu b'cha yodei shemecha. Have reliance on God. If you know God's name, rely on Him. Bitachon, not Bitcoin. Not Bitcoin, that's something else. Reliance on God. That is our ammunition in this war on terror. That's the story of the Parsha. Let's take it maybe a level deeper. There's a very puzzling Rashi at the very beginning of our Parsha. The first verse, first word, Vayeishev, Yaakov, and Jacob settled in the land where his father lived, in the land of Canaan. So there's a lot of commentary in Rashi. There's a very memorable and puzzling statement that he makes about this verse. The word Vayeishev means to settle. And we know we're not really supposed to settle here. We're transients in this world. Our real place where we actually permanently settle is in the spiritual world. This world we're here for, 50 years, 100 years, 70 years. Every moment is precious. Every moment is a gift. We don't know how long we're going to last. We don't know if we'll make it to tomorrow. We hope that we'll have a long and fruitful and productive life. But this world you're here to do something, to accomplish something. You're not here to settle. So Rashi zones in on that word, citing from the Midrash. Jacob wanted to live in peace and serenity. This one verse, it's an accusation. This one word, it's an accusation on Jacob. He wanted to settle. It's been very busy and chaotic. I want a little peace and relaxation. And right afterwards, the chaos of Joseph was foisted upon him. And Rashi tells us that tzaddikim, the righteous ones, they want to live bishalva in peace and serenity in this world. And God says, wait a minute, it's not enough that you have peace and serenity in the next world. You want it also over here? Jacob, you want to settle down? Okay, it's not going to happen. Now, this is very fierce criticism on Jacob. If you think about it, let's cut him some slack. He's had an insanely chaotic life. He's ping-ponging back Esav and 20 years with Laban, back to Esav, fighting the angel. Shimon and Levi destroy a city. Rachel dies. Reuben jumbles the sleeping arrangements. If anyone in the world deserves a vacation, a justly earned break, it's Jacob. And God says, no. That is not for this world. There's plenty of time for that. This world, it's for action. It's for movement. It's for dynamism. Jacob has exactly one verse, maybe even one word of a respite. And right away he's plunged into the chaos of Joseph. There's no rest for the weary. Now, what does it mean that Jacob sought relaxation? It's hard to imagine that Jacob wanted a hammock with a cigar and a massage in a spa, Cancun, Caribbean cruise, a week in Belize. It can't be that that's what Jacob wanted. The Talmud tells us that to study, you need to have quiet, you need to have clarity, you need to have serenity. You need to have lucidity of mind. It's certain that when Jacob wanted, Seder tells us, he wanted to settle, to sit down, he wanted quiet to advance his spiritual agenda. He wanted to advance the agenda of his soul. He wanted to grow and flourish in his pursuit of the agenda of the soul, and he needed the space and the quiet and the just a little break from the chaos to focus, to concentrate. And the Almighty says, no, that's not the way it's done. There is a world where you can grow and advance and flourish in a state of tranquility. The world's called Olam Haba, the world to come. There, we did a podcast on this a few years ago. So I'll say it briefly because I'm sure you all remember it and you re-listen to them. So I just assume that everyone knows everything that I've said, just as if they heard it yesterday. But several years ago, we spoke about the idea that even once a righteous person dies, they don't stop growing and changing. They just do it in a different setting, in a different environment. That's what Rashi's saying over here. That there is an environment where dynamic growth can happen in a state of serenity. But over here, in this world, the ideal setting for stratospheric greatness, it's actually when you're under duress. If someone wants stratospheric, meteoric, otherworldly greatness, it's only forged under fire. Jacob wanted to grow, he wanted to flourish. He wanted to do it in one way, in one modality, in peace. And God says, no, that's only for low-grade growth, low-grade flourishing. Here, what's expected of you, Jacob, you have to be challenged. You want to maintain your pace of growth and development? You have to be in a situation of dynamism. So God says, I'm foisting upon you the chaos of Joseph, and that's not a punishment. This is God positioning Jacob to achieve stratospheric greatness. Throwing the Joseph saga Jacob's way was for Jacob's benefit. And this is really the story of the Parsha. We have the founding of our people, really. Joseph is being sent to Egypt. This is part of the deep plan that was revealed to he who resides in Hebron. Judah's founding Messiah. Joseph is achieving his personal greatness. He's becoming a king. Each one of these transformations happens under fire. Joseph was with his family, and he's unremarkable. He doesn't excel. And the brothers look at him, there's nothing that we could say to possibly find any redeeming quality about you. They can't find a single positive thing to say about Joseph. And then he's sold as a slave. He's thrown into the fire. And he blossoms. He flowers. He flourishes in Egypt when he's in the most challenging and compromising of circumstances. When he was in a state of peace and serenity, he was unable to achieve his greatness. The turmoil, the challenge, the chaos, the pain, the difficulty, the disappointment, that brought out something absolutely magnificent in Joseph. Joseph rose to be king. He wouldn't have become king in Canaan, with his family, in the ideal setting, the setting of peace and serenity. He had to be plunged into the most uncomfortable, undesirable of circumstances, and there he achieved the stratospheric greatness, the type that you cannot earn on a hammock or a rocking chair. In next week's Parsha, the brothers are going to encounter Joseph again. And they're meeting him and they're talking to him. And he's playing games with them. And they never once consider this is maybe Joseph. They bow before a king, as was true in their dreams. It can't be Joseph. They never entertain that possibility. They cannot conceive that this terrifically talented, capable, competent, consummate king is actually Joseph. They knew Joseph. They were raised with Joseph. He's just not capable of what this person's doing. And you know what? They were right. When he was around them, when he was on the rocking chair, so to speak, he was not capable of that sort of greatness. But the might takes Joseph away from his family, and it seems so violent and so painful and so wrong. And he throws him into the fire, into the furnace, into the crucible. He's placed in the most unenviable of circumstances. He's placed in a machine that enables stratospheric greatness. And Joseph was up to the challenge, and he flowered, and he blossomed, and he flourished, and he lived up to those dreams, those literal dreams. From the bowels of the dungeons blossomed Joseph's immense potential. Judah also did something remarkable in our Parsha. Unwittingly, perhaps. He fathered Messiah. And he did so in the most spiritually challenging of circumstances. He was demoted. He lost his wife, 2 of his sons. He was duped into a union with his daughter-in-law. That's not rocking chair circumstances. This is how Judah fathered Messiah. The sort of greatness that was brought out in him cannot be accomplished in a state of shalva, of spiritual peace and serenity. Messiah comes from such circumstances, from Judah and Tamar. Monarchy springs from prison. Abraham, he comes from Terach. The Jewish nation surfaces in Egypt amidst slavery and depression and spiritual squalor. Our nation has been in exile for a long time. You think about just the history of our people, how long we've been around for. It's quite some time. And what percentage of that have we been in our land with the temple, actually fulfilling the basic components of our religion? It's about 800 some odd years that we were in the ideal setting. And 2,500 years outside of it? There's a gross asymmetry between how much time we spent on the rocking chair and how much time we spent in the prisons, so to speak, in Egypt. Why? Because our nation is also designated for stratospheric greatness. And there's a rule. Idyllic circumstances do not breed such greatness. There is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, authored by Hillel, and he gives a list of axioms, of aphorisms. Al tifrosh min hatzibur, don't depart from the public. Don't believe in yourself to the day you die. Don't judge your fellow until you arrive in their place. Don't say something that can never be heard, because it, in the end, will be heard. And the last line, it rhymes. Al tomar, don't say likishe efne eshna. That's a tongue twister. Likishe efne eshna. Don't say, when I have time, when I have peace, when things work out, then I'll study. Shema, because perhaps lo tipana, it will not quiet down. You won't have that peace that you are anticipating. Simply put, what this Mishnah is telling us is that, listen, ideally you'll have peace. Likisha efne, when things will finally settle down, then you should study. That would be ideal, but alas, make do with the bad conditions, because you don't know if you'll end up having the possibility of that peace and the quiet and that tranquility to be able to flourish. So study, even though it's not ideal. But the commentaries tell us that there's a deeper meaning here. There's two systems, there's two atmospheres, there's two environments of change, of growth, of progress. There's the progress of tranquility, and that's a much slower pace. And it's capped. The upside is more limited. And then there is a different track. The track that Joseph, Jacob, Judah were put on, our people collectively were put on. The giants of our people, all of them, have very difficult pathways to their greatness. Why? Because there's a different system. And that is the system of lotipana, where there isn't that peace of mind and that serenity and that freedom and that lucidity, that idyllic circumstances. Don't say, when things quiet down, then I'll study. No. Perhaps what the Almighty wants of you is to be on the other system, to be in the big leagues. Maybe He wants you to achieve great things, and that can only be done when things are chaotic, when things are in a state of upheaval. Maybe God wants stratospheric greatness from us. And the apparently non-ideal setting, that's actually the perfect breeding grounds for what we need to become. It's interesting. This is maybe a similar idea. The thing that, or the circumstances that bring out the greatest advances in technology, hate to say it, it's war. You look at all the inventions, like the pace of inventions and innovation that happen. It's in war, it forces people to unearth, people, individuals, communities, nations, to unearth abilities that they did not know that they had. And if they try their hardest in peacetime, they cannot achieve. We want peacetime growth. The Almighty says, Jacob, sorry. Vayeishev, it's one verse. It'll last one verse, that's it. I'm not willing to forfeit on wartime Jacob. I want wartime Jacob. And wartime Jacob is chaos, and it's confusion, and it's upheaval, and you don't want it. But the Almighty forces Jacob to achieve the higher level, the wartime growth. I think it's a good lesson. Who knows? Maybe the Almighty wants us to also achieve great things. And when we're in a situation, a circumstance that's Josephian, Judah-like, Jacob-like from our Parsha, we don't see the big picture. We don't know what the Almighty is actually trying to elicit out of us. But maybe, just maybe, He wants stratospheric greatness, and that is achieved in wartime. Our theme for year 9 of the Parsha Podcast is Torah is your ID. It's who you are. It's who we are as a people. We have some ideas, some weighty ideas that span the entire Parsha. Let's get to this week's dilemma, the dilemma. Joseph is a snitch. He sees his brothers do inappropriate things, and he runs to his father. What to do when you see others acting inappropriately? If you care about them, you want to help them, and you see them making terrible mistakes, you must reproach them. You must reprimand them. In fact, it's a mitzvah. You should give rebuke, criticism to your fellow man, to your fellow Jew who's acting inappropriately. But it seems like Joseph is doing the wrong thing, because Rashi told us that he accused his brothers of eating from an animal that hadn't died yet. And he accused them of sexual impropriety. And he accused them of assigning the label of slave to the brothers that came from the maidservants. So under what circumstances is revealing the slander of others? When is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? Did Joseph act appropriately? So it's a fascinating thing. If you look at the second verse of our Parsha, it's a very cumbersome verse. These are the children of Jacob. And then let's mention the children just focuses on Joseph. And it tells us, Joseph was 17 years old. V'hu nar, and he was a nar. Nar means a youth. With the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, the wives of his father, and Joseph brought the slander of his brothers to their father. A lot of stuff going on over here, a very busy verse. And of course, Rashi untangles it all for us. But if you focus on a few things, we find a very nice principle. It mentions that Joseph was a na'ar. He was a youth. We're told that he's 17. He's a youth. Is 17 a youth? I don't know. In Texas, you could already drive. In Israel, if you could reach your hand onto the counter, you could buy cigarettes. So you wouldn't even need to be 17. But you're kind of almost an adult, right? The verse tells us his age and says, he was a nar. He was a youth. Why is that significant? The verse says that Joseph told the slander of his brothers to their father. But the word that it chooses is vayave, and Joseph brought. He brought the slander. Typically, you would say vayesaper, and he would tell over. That would have been a more appropriate verb to describe what Joseph did. And in one verse, it has different conjugations of the word his father. Because Bnei's Bilhah and Zilpah, the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, it says the wives of his father. And then when it says that Joseph brought the slander, it doesn't say to his father, it says to their father. So again, complicated verse, a naughty verse. But here's a nice little rule of thumb. A heuristic. A Parsha Podcast heuristic. If you want to speak ill about someone else, you have to have 3 criteria. The first thing is you have to, before you tell over the rebuke to others, before you publicize it, even to another person, to an individual, you have to attempt to rebuke them, to remonstrate them yourself before you get others involved. Joseph was a nar. He was a youth. No one took him seriously. Joseph was a youth, and that is why he knew they wouldn't listen to him. And that gave him the grounds to fulfill the first criterion of slander. Joseph brought the slander to his father. The second criterion is if you tell over something negative, lashon hara about someone else, for the right purpose and the right circumstance, it has to be that you're not embellishing the story at all. You cannot add any more details than what exactly happened. Joseph brought. He was like just the carrier. He brought it. He didn't tell over the story. There was no filtering of the story through himself that made him the storyteller. He was not a storyteller. He just carried it, lived it, brought it to them. There was no embellishment, no storytelling involved. And finally, who did he bring it to? To their father. He didn't bring it to his father, to their father. He wasn't trying to gain anything. This was not for his benefit. It was for their benefit. You want to tell over slander? You want to have a productive instance where you can tell over something negative about someone else? It must follow these criteria. It must be beneficial. Beneficial for who? Beneficial for the person you're talking about. Parents, they can discuss their own children and their children's shortcomings or things they need to work on with each other. You could talk to a therapist or a teacher. It's productive. It's not lashon hara. It's not negative. It's positive. If you see someone who's acting inappropriately, you want to help them. You love them. You care for them. And if it's helpful to get someone else involved, that will be appropriate. But don't get anyone else involved unless you speak to them first. If you are unable to accomplish the goal yourself, that's when you are entitled, nay, you are mandated to get someone else involved. And there could be absolutely no embellishment of the actual story. If you follow these three criteria under that circumstance, as Joseph did, then it would be appropriate, it would be the right thing to convey this message. But of course, Joseph was punished. And the three things that he accused them of actually happened, or he was shown that this happened to him on some level, because after all, Joseph misread the circumstance. They actually were not guilty of these said alleged crimes. And in fact, we have entire books explaining exactly what Joseph thought. Why did Joseph think that they were eating Avram and Achai? They thought that they were eating flesh from a living animal. How exactly did Joseph misread the circumstance, the situation, and gave slander to his father that was actually untrue? But I think it's a nice heuristic that the commentaries note three criteria for when it's okay and in fact appropriate for a person to say or to share something negative about another person to a third party for the benefit of the person involved. With no embellishment, you're just bringing over the story, and you yourself are unable to influence the person who is being talked about. In that case, it would be appropriate to share the message. It's a dilemma what to do. This happens all the time, where you know something, you're aware of something, you're privy to something. Do you share that? Are you allowed to share it? What are the circumstances? There's entire books, in fact, written about this. But this is a nice rule of thumb. And that's what we like to do on the Parsha Podcast. Rules of thumb, heuristics. Heuristics. Torah is our ID. It's a heuristic. What is it? It's who we are. It's what we stand for as a people, as a nation. I appreciate your attention. Hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, or at least 50% of how much I enjoyed this. Have a wonderful rest of your day. A fantastic and splendid and uplifting and powerfully productive rest of your week. And a sensational, absolutely majestic Shabbos upcoming. And please God, with the help of the Almighty, we'll gather together again next week in great health and in great spirits, and hopefully with good tidings from all of our people, all of our brothers and sisters, wherever they may be, especially those in Israel. For another Parsha podcast, for Parshas Mitates, my email just says, rabbiwolbe@gmail.com.